Yeah, I was under the impression that we were done with the gangster genre.
Yep.
But then I was just thinking it over one day, and you'll probably notice that my American Gangster DVD is a little big.
Good
So
lord.
it's there's 3 discs in there.
That's like my Dogma DVD set, but it's thicker.
I'll do a little unboxing if time helps, if time allows. So we were just kind of talking about, potential future ideas that are already planned.
Yep.
And as we're having this conversation, I'm looking at my shelf, and as you can probably guess, when you look at my DVD shelves, this is pretty much always staring you in the face.
True.
Because it's also, not only is it thicker, it's big. Like when you see in comparison to New Jack City, see how much it sticks out on the side here? It just hangs off the shelf like that. Not to mention it's really close to the Alien box set. So that whole area of A's just kind of bulges out of my shelf.
There is no stand, if you're noticing. It's literally standing up on its own.
It's like the Wizard of Oz one.
Yeah, well, the other one's a laptop, so...
We'll forget about that. So, I saw American Gangster sticking out, and in the briefest thoughts, I was like, what can be teamed up with American Gangster? And for some reason, it was like deciding to do Newsies and Swing Kids. For some reason, in my head, when I said, what can go up against American Gangster, it took me all of maybe 10 seconds to say New Jack City. So, this is why this is happening to you.
The end of the gangster theme permanently?
I am not sure what's up. We haven't done Dick Tracy yet.
That's true. We need to.
I really, really want to do Dick Tracy, but we'll figure that out.
We will, don't worry.
I probably should have taken the opportunity to do it with Gangster Squad, but then we wouldn't have anything to do with the Untouchables, so I don't know. I don't know anymore.
And no Jimmy Cagney that I can see either. Unless he had a bit role in something we've already talked about.
The thing about it is just the classic verses don't do very well.
No. It does have a market. It does have a market.
If I were to do the Public Enemy and White Heat, it'd get like 3, if that, views. So, anyway, this is actually the Public Enemy and Little Caesar are probably better.
Yep. Those are the ones from the Great Movie, right?
The Edward G. Robinson one.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about these. Let's start with American Gangster. American Gangster is the 150th outing with Ridley Scott and Russell Crowe. And it's a movie that it was on Denzel's IMDb page forever. It was originally called The Return of Superfly. And it was called that like forever. It was called that, I think this was also, I think it had another title, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head now. And it basically pits, it's a very, obviously it's a true story, of course, but it's also a very classic story of cop versus criminal. And I really love this image where it kind of does the old Western thing where the good guy's in white and the bad guy's in black. Just that whole image. And the whole thing where I say the bad guy is in black, but your question is, well, Frank Lucas is this terrible, terrible criminal who does these horrible things, but, we still see him as, like a family guy, and, he likes to take care of, the people around him and stuff like that. And the whole thing we talk about with the Scorsese movies and The Godfather about glorifying crime bosses. The thing about that I really loved that they did, Steven Zalian wrote the script, who is fantastic. I know he kind of gets a bad rap because a lot of people think his movies are overrated, but I think he pretty much, the big movies you see that his name were attached to, I believe he wrote Schindler's List, and I think Fincher's Dragon Tattoo. He scripts a lot of big projects that you have seen. What he and Ridley Scott did with this movie, I really, really love. If there is a question about whether or not they are glorifying Frank Lucas, the opening scene of this movie, we start in darkness, we fade in, a guy is getting doused in gas, and Frank Lucas sets him on fire and lets him burn for a while, and then when he falls over, he shoots him like 3 times, and then we fade out, and the title comes up. And that shows you immediately the kind of person we're dealing with, and how he is not going to be portrayed as some misunderstood criminal that, you know, loved everybody and did everything he could to help people. He did try to help people, but opening like that shows you who he really is. And I thought that was really great and really kind of ballsy, too, with the way these movies typically portray that type. And then we learned that he's just Bumpy Johnson's driver. At this point in the movie, that's all he is. But then as we see Bumpy Johnson's death in the very next scene. And then Frank manages to take over while we have the parallel subsequent story of Richie Roberts, who is Russell Crowe, who is the cop that's going through a divorce while simultaneously trying to take them. It takes a while for him to come, for their paths to cross, and for him to even know who Frank Lucas is. But it's getting to that point that makes this movie so great. How we kind of just slowly and gradually get there, and we see these two people in totally different places. Their lives are not even remotely close to crossing yet. And it just kind of slowly gets there. We start off with, well, obviously that's how we're introduced to Frank. And then we go to Richie and we see how he's trying to defend himself in court. And the very next scene, I always loved how this scene works with, they're pulling up to Kevin Corrigan's house. And he and John Ortiz get out. There's so many people in this movie. There are so many goddamn people in this movie. And it's great. And their names will continue to pop up soon. So Crowe and John Ortiz get out of the car, and he's talking about how public speaking makes him queasy, and how there's nothing more fearful than public speaking. And as he's saying this, he is charging to Kevin Corrigan's door with a sledgehammer in his hand. So, public speaking makes me way too queasy. And it's just great how they handle his character. We see him, you know, fucking his lawyer and stuff like that, and it seems like all this is in this aimless direction, yet the way they just lay the foundation out on these two guys before building up to their actual rivalry that happens, like, in the middle of the movie. It's just really, really well done. Like, this is definitely a movie that earns its runtime. It's like 240 or close to that. But every minute means something. Or builds a character in some way. And then you have this great, like I said, this great lineup of supporting players. Like, my God, like a lot of them weren't as known then as they are now. This was 2007. This was 8 years ago. And we had obviously this was an attention-grabbing performance from Cuba Gooding Jr. He's only in it for like 5 minutes, but he has like a really prominent billing, and he really, really comes. We see him, like, you know, snorting coke and, you know, trying to actually confront Frank Lucas, which is just something that it takes balls to do, especially since Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character is taking Frank Lucas's drugs and basically changing them a little bit, but keeping the name on them and selling them for himself and making a profit, which is really not something you should be doing. But he's just a gangster that is so out of his mind with power that he is not afraid of Frank Lucas and will do whatever the fuck he wants. Like, he's only in the movie for like 5 minutes, but he totally makes an impression. Another great character in this movie, an actor. This was the first time I had seen him in a movie. Was this movie? Of course, I'm talking about Idris Elba as Tango. Tango is another gangster who kind of worked with Bumpy, who only sees Frank as like a flunky still. When they're at Bumpy's funeral, and we kind of see that anger building in Frank when he sees Tango, because he's not using a coaster and he's causing a mess with that, and then Frank comes up and tries to kind of, you know, kind of somewhat lay on the power's going to be mine now. And Tango just kind of brushes him away and says, "Hey man, will you give me a lighter?" And just leaves it at that. Which leads me to the great thing that they do with Frank's character, how his gradual rise to power. And we really start to see the power take over him when his family comes back into the picture. His brothers Chiwetel Ejiofor and Common are his brothers, and there's a whole lot of his cousins coming in. And Chiwetel basically ends up playing the brother that Huey basically is the like his right hand man from here on, and he's the one where he says like, you know, from now on nobody talks to me. You talk to Huey, and Huey talks to me. Yeah, that's as good of a Denzel as I can do. And they set up this great thing where his power just totally, it's not just suddenly there. You can kind of tell it's been building and building to this, as we saw in the opening scene. But we see him through the eyes of his family. Obviously his family who grew up with him and have never seen, you know, power-hungry Frank before. They only know him as the brother they grew up with. And they're sitting in this restaurant, and he's telling them, they're just going over everything. And he's just saying, you know, this is, you know, how we run things. This is how I got to where I am. And he's throwing out a lot of philosophical quotes and stuff like that. And he sees Tango out the window. And he goes over there with his family watching through the window. And he says, you know, he's wanting his mind. And he even takes the sugar jar to him that he took from the restaurant. And he pulls a gun and puts it right up to Tango's forehead and says, you know, give me my money. And Tango just says, are you going to shoot me here in front of everybody? And that's what he does.
It's one of my favorite scenes, too, without a doubt.
In front of everybody in public, in front of his family watching through the windows of the diner. And that's when everybody realizes, that's when everything takes a turn, and everybody, you know, Frank Lucas becomes somebody. His line right before that is, you're either somebody or you're nobody. And that's when that really takes over. And it kind of happens again with the You Talk to Huey scene, where they're at the party, and he crushes the guy's head repeatedly in the piano. Just how he's played up as one of those very smooth, calculating people who knows what he's talking about, and it's very obvious how he got this power. Can just snap like that, and he's really unassuming until those things happen. Like, even when you've already seen them happen, like, even though you've seen him kill the guy in the opening scene, and you've seen him shoot Tango in the head at point-blank range in public, it's still kind of jarring and surprising when he smashes the guy's head in the piano later. Because he wins you back over with his charm and how he runs things. And that's have I mentioned that this is one of Denzel's most brilliant performances, but it's one that hardly gets talked about? Like, him getting snubbed at the Oscars was really talked about back then.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But now nobody talks about this performance or this movie. And it's really one of his best performances. It's way up there. And we're talking about Denzel, so there is a lot of roles here that are worth talking about. And I think this is really one of his best. Another big side character we have is Trubo, the very, very dirty detective played by Josh Brolin. I love Josh Brolin in this movie. In general, of course, but in this movie, definitely. This was Josh Brolin's big year. He had No Country for Old Men, and then earlier in the year, Planet Terror had come out, and he had a couple of scenes in the Valley of Ella. This was when he like really, really took off. And this and No Country for Old Men kind of came out around the same time. Because everybody wanted to point out that in both this and No Country, he shoots and kills a dog. And it was just funny that they came out at the same time. And for a while, like, he's introduced at the very beginning. Like, we're kind of rapidly introducing everybody in the first 20 minutes or so. And then, like, an hour later, he comes back into the story. And we see exactly what he's doing. And he's got like the white pimp suit, and he's just he's got his hair slicked back, he's got the mustache, and he's just this really slimy dude, but the way Brolin plays it is amazing. And then he kind of has a rivalry with Richie there for a little bit, but then it's later when he comes back into the story and has the rivalry with Frank, and that's when the character really gets, you know, the really good scenes. I love when he stops Frank after he's just gotten married, and they're on their way to their honeymoon, and and they have this confrontation, and that eventually results in Frank sending a Thanksgiving gift to Trubo, which is his car exploding. And then I love how they have this back and forth where he and Huey have a run-in with him, where the stuff's in the backseat, and Trubo is like threatening them, and he says Frank's trying to, you know, calm the situation and say, let's just, let this fly and, nothing's going to happen and just forget this ever happened. And Trupo says, well, how about I just throw you and your brother in the river? And Frank immediately fires back with, well, how about your house blows up next time? And that ends the whole conversation. And they just have this rivalry with him throughout the movie, and I love that little. There's a whole vast story happening in this movie, and that's just one portion of it. I really really love that little part. And then we have there's a lot of people kind of look back questioningly at the Oscar nomination and SAG win for Ruby Dee, who is in this movie for like 5 minutes. Because she has the one big scene. She's kind of there. She's basically Jackie Weaver in Silver Linings Playbook. She's the mother role who's kind of in the background being supportive and all that. But then there's the one big scene towards the very end of the movie when everybody's getting arrested and everybody's getting found out. And she realizes where this house came from and what it is that Frank does. And she talks about, his wife will leave him and she'll leave him. She does the drama slap. It's that kind of scene. But it's a really, really great scene. And it's only like 20 seconds long. But it is a really powerful scene. Even if, the slap is kind of a mocked dramatic thing nowadays. The Oprah one and the Butler is considered one of the worst. When she slapped David Oyelowo. But, looking at this cast list, I'm surprised David Oyelowo is not in this movie.
Yeah?
This might have been before his time, 2007. I'm not sure when his first movie was. But anyway, we also have this side thing with T.I. is in this movie. Tip Harris is in this movie as the nephew who is gonna go on to be a great baseball player, but then he kind of wants to be Frank too, and then it ends up being a decision that costs him his life. They do that whole thing, but all of this works. This whole ensemble and everything they gather here. But the thing that's really great here is to watch the transformation of Frank's character. And how they never really just kind of go in one direction. Sometimes he kind of lapses back into, like, rookie territory. I love the little storyline of how he's so calculated and has such power and clearly knows what to do with it and how to handle it. But even he makes mistakes that end up really, really costing him. Case in point, the scene where they're at that party and Huey's wearing that suit that he just bought. And Frank gives him this whole lecture of how you got to keep a low profile and you can't, dress that way and because you're just, begging to be arrested. And he says the loudest person in the room is the weakest and stuff like that. And after this whole thing, his wife gives him this really big, obnoxious fur coat and hat as a gift. And he decides to wear this at the biggest boxing event, like one of the biggest boxing events like in history, and every fucking buddy is at this boxing match, and that's how he gets found out by everybody. Trupo is the first one to notice him because his response is, I think this is before Trupo's ever identified Frank Lucas at all, and everybody's response is, "Who is that really really rich guy, and how the fuck is he so close to the ring? Like he's closer to the ring than the Italian mobsters are." And then Richie notices this also from watching the fight, and that's how they found out who he was. That one mistake. So I love how they throw those things in there. There's also that moment where he's still kind of a naivete still kind of comes out every now and then to show you that he's not flawless and not invincible. The Armando Sante has a really good part in this movie. They were just throwing parts to random people in this movie. Nope, you are not watching a straight-to-DVD gangster movie. Armando Sante was in American Gangster. And they're having that conversation, and there's just that one moment where it's kind of hard to tell if he's kidding, but it seems like a very, like, brief, vulnerable moment of naivete here, where Armando Sante says, so how do you feel about Monopoly? And Frank's response is, the game? I love that little delivery. So I love how his character is never just like the big rise to power guy and then he just kind of stays there. He always has those ups and downs where he fucks up or kind of shows a bit of weakness. Like the moment where he beats the shit out of Huey for getting caught by Trupo with shit in their trunk. Like that was just a really careless thing. And yeah, there's recognizable faces all through this movie. Norman Reedus is one of the cops in the morgue, randomly. There's Roger Bart shows up towards the end as the racist guy that they're trying to convince, Frank Lucas is the guy that took over, and he's like, what family is he with? And they're like, oh no, he's a black guy, he's not Italian. And he almost doesn't believe that a black guy could do this. He's more racist about it in his terminology. So, yes, there is just a lot of... So many... Like, this is one of those movies where I almost always forget just how good it is. Like, when I sit down and watch it, I just get blown away every time. It's like, man, I forgot just how great this movie is. It's just this sprawling story that's told so well, and it feels... A great thing is it feels really old-fashioned, too. Like, it feels like it feels like a movie from the 70s, not just from the era. Not just set in that era. And they kind of play with the setting too. Like we see like them, discovering how a microwave works. Like the microwave's like a brand new thing, and fixing popcorn in it is like mind blowing.
It is a science oven after all.
Yeah. It very much fits the setting of the movie to have it kind of feel like an old fashioned 70s crime movie. And the thing that always kind of I found interesting was how it doesn't. I mean, I know he's been kind of on a decline lately, but it does not at all feel like a Ridley Scott movie. Like when I was watching it, if anything, when I was watching it my most recent time, if anything, it feels like a Michael Mann movie, much more than a Ridley Scott movie. But, total props to Ridley Scott for being able to make a movie that, doesn't necessarily have his stamp on it, but it's just kind of... Yeah, it's because of Ridley Scott that this movie manages to be as great as it is, on top of Steven Zaley and Denzel's brilliant performance. And this massive ensemble. There's so many things to love about this movie. I didn't even mention the great scene where Frank is finally arrested. It seems like a cliche, I know, but with Amazing Grace playing in the church. And all the cops are gathered there, and Richie's just waiting outside the church for him. And how they almost have like that instant respect and partnership when they're in the interrogation room. When Frank says, Frank realizes he cannot believe how honest of a cop Richie is because everybody's fucking corrupt. And as soon as he realizes who Richie's after, because he's like, if you want me to rat people out, I'll tell you the cops. But what are you gonna do with that? And then he cannot believe that Richie actually wants to arrest the cops. So he immediately earns his respect with it. And that ended up getting Frank only 15 years. So, it's just a really epic story that makes every minute count, and it's really, really well told and acted amazing. I forgot, John Hawkes is Crow's new partner after John Ortiz has the drug overdose. And RZA is another one of the cops. So there's just everybody. You can just pick out all kinds of people in there that are famous. Some people obviously already, were there at this time, but they're much more famous now. So yes, I cannot say enough good things about American Gangster. And it just adds to the magnificent year. How many times do I mention how fucking great of a year 2007 was for movies? It's insane. It's seriously one of, if not the best year for movies we've ever had. Now, jumping ahead a decade to the 80s, we have New Jack City, which is set in 86. And it's a very, very basic story. And the movie's also a swift hour and a half. It's basically the same story, just American Gangster is 1 hour longer. Like, an entire hour longer. But New Jack City's got its own thing going on. We are immediately introduced to our villain, who is Nino Brown, who is Wesley Snipes, who is a legendary 90s movie villain.
Yes.
Just listen to, every now and then when Jamie Foxx goes on talk shows, he said that he grew up with this movie, and it's just funny to hear him just quote everything. I think it was a Conan appearance, where half the interview was just Jamie Foxx speaking in Nino Brown quotes. And it was great. And of course the opening scene, much like American Gangster, sets up the kind of person we're dealing with. And they're hanging him over a bridge. And they, I don't know New York very well, but I'm sure it was a major bridge they were dangling this guy off of. And he just casually, they taunt him a little bit, and he says, the money talks, bullshit runs the marathon, and stuff like that. And then they end up dropping him. And unlike Frank Lucas, obviously, Nino Brown's rise to power is very, very abrupt.
Yeah.
Because the movie is moving very, very quickly. There is no, nothing. Okay, I misread that. Sorry. No, I was reading the back of the box, not the. No. So the thing about it is, he gets this plan that he just lays out, just like nothing, where they're gonna sell crack and make it out of this apartment building, and basically take over the guy that's already running things. And the plan goes very smoothly within like 2 minutes of time. All it takes is a montage. They go to the one guy and they shoot him point blank in the head, in the streets, just like that. And then they go to the guy that owns the big apartment building, and he strips him down, puts a gun to his head, and drags him around in public until he just hands over the building to them. And then they run in with guns and raid everybody out. And then they take over. And that's what it is. Now, the thing about it is, what really, really sells this is how big Nino's personality is. Makes it really, really easy to buy that all of this was possible. And how he could take over the city this easily. And this is easily, like, imagine, like, remember in the beginning of Demolition Man, when Simon Phoenix is in 1996? This is kind of like how I imagine he was. Like, we don't really get to know him until he's in the future, but I kind of imagine this is what Simon Phoenix was when John Spartan first found him in Demolition Man. And like I said, he's one of those guys where he is kind of a cliche. There is the scene where he's watching, he's always projecting Scarface onto the wall. And just kind of, hurting his employees just to kind of show power. And like I was saying, he's endlessly quotable. Like, I believe his most famous quote is, "Set your $5 ass down before I make change." There is, "Get their silly spaghetti eating asses out of here." There is, another popular one is, there's the girl that's kind of like his, I guess, love interest of sorts, I guess if you want to call her that. He just kind of puts her down on the table and dumps a bottle out over her head and says, "Cancel this bitch, I'll buy another one." This is the kind of guy we're dealing with. And it is the ultimate. I mean, I really, really love Simon Phoenix. He's one of my all-time favorite villains in Demolition Man. But this was Wesley Snipes' ultimate role. This is the one that was just pure Snipes. From down to where he dresses, from the lines to just how he handles the power, just everything about this character is just enticing, and you can't take your eyes off of him. And of course, the other part of this story is we have the determined cop who is Mario Van Peebles, and he's bringing in two, loose cannon cops, Ice-T and Judd Nelson, who don't get along at all for race reasons, obviously. One of the first things Judd Nelson does is shoot bullet holes in the form of a smiley face into Ice-T's wall, which is a nice effect. And he has to convince Ice-T to do this, and it eventually becomes a Grudge movie, because we're introduced to Pookie. Pookie is a very major character in this movie. However, there's some interesting things going on here. For starters, Pookie is played by Chris Rock. And he is this witness who's basically going to help them, but first he has to go into rehab and detox and all that because he is a major crack addict. And Chris Rock got a lot of acclaim for this performance. Like, I guess even to this day, he's still, like, really beloved for it in certain places. And he was saying at one point that he was so convincing as a crack addict that I guess people, like, even as Chris Rock walking out in public, people would run up and like put like crack and cocaine in his pockets because they really bought him as that character. But the weird thing about it is, I get the purpose of it, but when you're watching it, like when you see Nino's story and you see the cop's story, Pookie's story right in the middle of this seems really out of place. Like, it seems like it's from a totally different movie, like some rehabilitation, redemption drama of sorts, because there are these really heavy scenes of him, like, detoxing, and then he walks out of rehab, but then he eventually comes back, and he finally gets clean, and there's moments where after he's clean, he's really, really struggling with that pipe, that he eventually relapses, and it's this really sad, heartbreaking story right in the middle of this really gritty crime movie. Like, I understand its purpose, because they need him to, like, get clean and then infiltrate, because they know him, but still, it seemed really, and I get why it's in there, and it works well. It's just, for a while there, it feels like you're watching a totally different movie. But Rock's performance really, really makes it work. And there's also some other supporting roles in here, like Bill Cobbs comes in and out of the movie. Obviously, at the end, he's very, very important, but they're kind of building to that big scene at the climax where Bill Cobbs just kind of comes in and out of this movie, and it's just kind of setting up how he feels about Nino and where they might be headed, which we all know. And Bill Nunn has a good part as the Dutta Man. That's all they call him. That's all he's credited as, because he stutters, and that's just what they call him. Vanessa Williams is in this as the I believe she's the bitch that gets canceled. I better be careful what I say. I don't want to get in Jeremy Renner trouble or anything. And the performances in this are well, some of them obviously are people still kind of, not in their comfort zone, but then you have people like Chris Rock and Ice-T. Obviously, I can praise Snipes to the heavens all day. But when you look at Chris Rock and Ice-T, to my understanding, Ice-T was kind of going through the thing Ice Cube did with Boys in the Hood, where John Singleton was trying to get him in that movie, but he didn't feel like he could do it, and stuff like that. Ice-T, I guess, was under the impression that the movie was going to fail, and it would ruin his rapping career, and he didn't really want to go into the acting thing. But somehow he got convinced, and the movie ended up being really successful. And he's really good in it, too. One of the best lines in the movie. It's good for a laugh, but it's also kind of badass. Even though it really just kind of catches you by surprise. Obviously, it's become a grudge movie by this point, because of Ice-T's closeness to Pookie, who obviously was killed once he got found out. He's finally caught Nino, and he's just on top of him, beating the holy shit out of him, like almost beating him practically to death. And then he stands up and he pulls the gun on him, and with this psychotic look on his face, looks down at Nino and says, "I want to shoot you so bad my dick's hard." And he fucking means it.
Sounds like it.
And that takes us into the climax of this movie. You have this gritty movie going on. You have all the crime stuff going on. There's big shootouts that go down. And there is a big climatic shootout that goes down here and everything. But the real climax of this movie is inside a courtroom when Nino takes the stand. And Snipes is so fucking glorious in this scene. Like, you wouldn't think so, but Nino becomes full-on Nino when he's in court. And it's a fantastic scene, and it was a great way for the movie to go out. It's also worth noting this was Mario Van Peebles' directorial debut. And there's an ode to his dad in it, because the scene where, obviously, you cannot play Scarface in movies without it being the "Say Hello to My Little Friend" scene.
Yeah.
But this movie actually understands that is the end of the movie. So, after that scene is playing, they go into another room, and then they eventually come back in, and a new movie has started on the projector. And it's Sweet Sweetback's Badass song.
Nice.
And it's, like, instantly recognizable, too. I was like, Sweetback, I just realized that's what that is. That's a nice callback. So yes, this movie really works, and it is like pure. It like even though it's set in the 80s, it is pure 90s crime movie, like all over. Like it's early 90s, it's 91, but still, it's funny. This movie was released the year that Frank Lucas was released from prison. I didn't do that on purpose. But on top of being Flava Flav is in this movie as himself. That's how fucking 90s this movie is.
Wow.
He's performing in one of Nino's clubs. But while being that, it's also nice how much humanity they give the characters. Like, even though I was talking about how Pookie's scenes feel really out of place when they're serious, it's really interesting to see such humanity in a movie like this. And how he and Ice-T was chasing him at the beginning of the movie and trying to catch him, and how they managed, like, Ice-T was basically setting out to avenge him after he was killed. And then just the humanity to give them. And even Nino has that scene where he's on the roof with the G-Money, and he knows that he's getting ready to kill him. And you get, like, the tears. The Nino tears that you don't expect to see before he pulls the trigger on him. And he does the whole, it's always business, it's never personal thing. And I thought that just worked really, really well. There's the scene where Bill Cobb tries to confront him and the kid is there. You know, they throw in those little things to kind of try to give Nino that humanity, but it never really comes through until that scene with G-Money on the roof. And you actually see that he's like a real person, even though we never really see that side of him again. Still, knowing that it's there makes the character work. Yeah, and it feels really influential too. Like, you watch the movie and you think like it's the stuff that reminds you of a lot of different movies, but then you realize that this actually came before those, and it's movies that are lifting off of it. So yeah, it's definitely while being a crime classic, I still feel it's a little underrated. A 90s crime classic. So yeah, it definitely has its followers in certain places, but I don't feel like it really has, you know, the beloved quality it deserves. It needs to be wider. This movie needs to be wider loved, I think. But having said all that, you know, there's just, you know, American Gangster is its own big monster, and I think it's this really great. It really deserves to be kind of mentioned in the same breath as the big ones, the big movies of this genre. I know that might seem, you know, going a little far, but I'm being totally serious. So yes, I'd go with American Gangster, but New Jack City's definitely that. But the great thing about it is with New Jack City's length, you can watch it over and over and over again. So yes, both of them are great for their own reasons, but choosing between the two, American Gangster really, really pulled something off that's something great. So
that's what we've got for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed the movie reviews on Friday and the podcast I did with Ashley on Saturday. Gaming with Ash is actually going to be tomorrow. We're going to flip the schedule around a little bit. Tuesday, Ashley and I are also going to be doing that Raw Popcast. Wednesday is going to be Impact. Usually Impact's going to be NXT this time around because Impact we're doing live. Obviously, we did it live last night. And Brand New Sip and Snack and AJ's movie reviews, Mad Max Fury Road, and Pitch Perfect 2. Saturday, Gaming with Ash returns to its regular day. And Sunday, your cryptic comment is Amnesia. So, that's all we've got for today. That's all we got for this weekend. AJ, any parting words?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna reveal what's inside.
You do have parting words.
Real quick.
You have an unboxing.
Yeah, it's got the cool ribbon. You have like, in order to get the DVD out, you have to pull on it. We have a Frank Lucas quote and a Richie quote as well, and it comes with this book that has, you know, production notes and stills and shit. Really, get out of the way, New Jack City. You're in the way, goddammit. It's very, very nice. And this actually did not cost all that much, and I got it when it came out. No, it was like $35. That's a lot. But
3 discs, that's not bad. Now.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what all is on it, but it's very, very nice to look at, and it actually feels like a novel or something. It's a very, very nice to have as far as a DVD collection. I gotta put this ribbon underneath. So, that's what that is. In case you were curious.
And if you want any more unboxings of AJ's ginormous DVD collection, let me know. And
I think I tried that with the Alien box set, and it wouldn't fit in the frame. So, yeah. Because the Alien box set's like a mile long when you unravel it.
Yeah, we've got some ideas for things we could do that are beyond versus movies that just don't fit. Maybe doing like retrospectives of movies that need to be talked about, need to be like discussed, but they don't have anything to really combat. So that may be coming up soon, but right now versus is not going anywhere. We got a list a mile long, and that's no lie. So
I don't want to sell New Jack City Short. This is also a 2-disc special edition.
It doesn't look like one.
Yeah, it came out in like 2006. And it's a nice DVD as well. It's very nice. It's reflective and all that. It doesn't have that normal Warner Brothers case that snaps on the side.
I hate those.
It's got a really nice thing going on.
I think the reason I didn't realize it was a 2-disc, except for looking at the top of it, is the fact that American Gangster is so ginormous.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
Okay, I think we're done here.
Alright, that being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?